You've spent years building your life, career, relationships, identity. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, you feel it, that suffocating weight. Like you're performing in a play you never auditioned for. Like freedom is something other people have, but not you. And the worst part? You can't explain why. You just know that somewhere, deep down, something is wrong. Most people die without ever understanding what kept them trapped. They blame their job, their partner, their circumstances. But Jung knew better. He understood that the chains we wear were forged long before we could speak, before we could think, before we even knew what freedom meant. Your childhood wasn't just a phase you outgrew. It was the blueprint for every pattern, every fear, every self-sabotaging behavior you can't seem to break. The child you were is still there, buried beneath years of conditioning, controlling your life from the shadows. And until you face that child, until you understand what happened to them, you'll never be free. Think about it. Why do you freeze when someone raises their voice? Why does rejection feel like death? Why do you work yourself into exhaustion, seeking approval from people who barely notice you exist? These aren't rational responses. They're echoes. Echoes of a child who learned that love was conditional, that safety was earned, that being yourself was dangerous. Every adult walking this earth is in some way still that wounded child, still trying to earn love they should have received freely, still protecting themselves from dangers that no longer exist, still wearing masks they put on so long ago they've forgotten they're wearing them at all. But how exactly does a child learn to abandon themselves? How does the shadow form in those early years, shaping everything that comes after? That's where we go next, into the darkness where it all began. The shadow begins in childhood, not as something evil or dark, but as survival. When a child learns that certain parts of themselves are bad, their anger, their needs, their authentic expression, they don't destroy those parts. They bury them. They create a shadow. Picture a 5-year-old, full of life, full of emotion. They're angry because something feels unfair. But anger isn't acceptable. Good children don't act like that. So they learn. They adapt. They push the anger down, deep into the unconscious, and present a smile instead. They become what they need to be to survive in their family system. This is how the shadow is born. Through 1,000 small betrayals of the self. Through learning that who you really are isn't acceptable. That love comes with conditions. That safety requires performance. But here's what most people never understand. The shadow doesn't disappear. It grows stronger in darkness. That repressed anger doesn't vanish. It turns into passive aggression, into self-destruction, into patterns of behavior you can't explain. That rejected need for attention doesn't go away. It becomes desperate people-pleasing, chronic overwork, or an insatiable hunger for validation that no amount of success can fill. Jung wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. The more you deny these parts of yourself, the more power they have. You become a puppet to your own unconscious, dancing to strings you can't even see. Modern society makes this worse. We're told to be positive, to move on, to leave the past behind. But you can't outrun your shadow. It's attached to you. It follows you into every relationship, every job, every attempt at happiness. And it whispers the same messages you heard as a child. You're not enough. You're too much. You need to be different. Social media becomes a stage for performing the acceptable self, while the shadow grows hungrier. We curate our lives, filter our faces, craft our words, all to avoid the one thing we fear most: being seen as we really are, being rejected for who we really are, just like we were as children. The shadow contains more than just pain. It holds everything you've disowned, including your power. The child who was too sensitive might have been deeply intuitive. The one who was too angry might have had a strong sense of justice. But when you reject the shadow, you reject these gifts too. This is why Jung said individuation, becoming whole, requires facing the shadow, not conquering it, not destroying it, facing it, acknowledging it, integrating it. Most people spend their lives running from this encounter. They medicate with work, with relationships, with substances, with endless distraction. Anything to avoid sitting alone with the parts of themselves they learned were unlovable. But the shadow doesn't care about your avoidance strategies. It finds ways to surface. It surfaces in the partner you choose who treats you exactly like your critical parent did. In the boss you can never please, no matter how hard you work. In the addiction that numbs the pain you won't acknowledge. In the depression that descends when the performance becomes too exhausting to maintain. These aren't random misfortunes. They're the shadow's way of demanding attention, of saying, "Look at me, deal with me, integrate me, or I will keep recreating the same pain until you do." The child within you is still waiting, still hoping someone will finally see them, accept them, love them as they are. But here's the brutal truth. That someone has to be you. No one else can do this work. No amount of success or recognition can heal what you refuse to acknowledge. Freedom begins the moment you stop running, the moment you turn toward the shadow instead of away from it. This isn't about wallowing in childhood pain or blaming your parents. It's about finally seeing the patterns, understanding why you react the way you do, why certain situations trigger such intense responses. When you understand that your fear of abandonment comes from a childhood where love was inconsistent, you can start to see it for what it is: an old program running on outdated information. When you recognize that your perfectionism stems from a child's desperate attempt to earn approval, you can begin to question whether you still need to perform for love. This is shadow work, not analyzing your childhood endlessly, but catching yourself in the moment, noticing when you're reacting from a wounded place, asking, is this response proportionate to what's actually happening? Or am I responding to a ghost? The shadow speaks in extremes. Always, never, everyone, no one. When you hear these words in your mind, you're hearing the voice of a child who learned the world in black and white. But you're not a child anymore. You can hold complexity. You can feel anger without being bad. You can have needs without being needy. You can be imperfect without being worthless. Integration doesn't mean the shadow disappears. It means you develop a relationship with it. You learn its voice. You understand its fears. And slowly, you stop letting it drive your life. This is what Jung meant by individuation. Not becoming perfect. Not healing completely. But becoming conscious. Aware. Whole. Including the parts you've hidden, denied, projected onto others. Here's what freedom actually looks like. It's not the absence of childhood wounds. It's the presence of consciousness around them. It's catching yourself before you fall into old patterns. It's choosing differently, even when every cell in your body wants to repeat the familiar dysfunction. It's realizing that the love you sought from others was always meant to come from within. that the safety you craved externally can only be built internally, that the acceptance you performed for was never worth the price of self-betrayal. Jung understood something most people never grasp. You can't think your way to freedom. You can't meditate away your shadow. You have to descend. You have to meet the abandoned child within. You have to feel what you've avoided feeling. This is why most people never become free. Not because they can't, but because they won't. They'd rather stay in familiar pain than face unfamiliar truth. They'd rather keep performing than risk being seen. But you're still reading, which means some part of you knows. Some part of you is tired of running, tired of performing, tired of the exhausting effort it takes to be someone you're not. That part of you, that's not your shadow. That's your authentic self, calling you home, telling you it's time. Time to stop abandoning yourself the way you were once abandoned. Time to stop rejecting yourself the way you were once rejected. The child you were is still there, still waiting. Not for rescue, but for recognition. Not for saving, but for integration. They don't need you to fix the past. They need you to stop repeating it. Your freedom isn't in forgetting your childhood. It's in finally remembering it, fully, honestly, consciously. In seeing how the past shaped you without letting it define you. In understanding your patterns without being enslaved by them. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the choice. Continue calling it fate. Bad luck, wrong timing, other people's fault. Or finally see it for what it is, the shadow of a child who learned to survive by becoming someone else, still running your life from the darkness. The door to your cage was never locked. You just couldn't see it because you were looking in the wrong direction. You were looking out when you needed to look in. You were running forward when you needed to turn around. Freedom isn't somewhere you arrive. It's something you become. One conscious choice at a time. One integrated shadow at a time. One reclaimed piece of yourself at a time. The child you were deserves to be heard. The adult you are deserves to be free. The question is, are you finally ready to stop running?